to Live the African Dream podcast. My name is Eunice Ajim and I'm your host. Today I am super excited. We have Blessing Abeng. She's the co-founder and director of communication at Ingressive for Good. Ingressive for Good is a non-profit created to increase the earning power of African youth in need by empowering them with tech skills, resources, community, and the power of work. In just 2 years, they have built a strong and thriving community of over 200,000 trained and over 200,000 Africans, and they have trained over 100,000 tech skills. They've partnered with global brands like Coursera, DataCamp, Facebook, Figma, TeamApp, Masterclass, and many other prestigious tech companies. A vital resource where young Africans are supported and help each other succeed. Ingressive for Good is a sister organization of Ingressive Capital, a venture capital firm that invests in African startups. Man, that was a long introduction. Leslie, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure. I'm so happy to be here. And you really tried to read all of that intro. I'm just so proud of you.
No, I mean, we had a very short intro, and I said, I gotta say all of this. Like, it's so important. And we're going to talk a lot more about why that, like mentioning the 200,000 community members and the fact that you guys have trained over 100,000. I don't know, it might be just Africans, it might be more than Africans, tech skills. Like, that's a huge accomplishment in just 2 years. So,
thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I really want to get started. I know we focus on the company and Ingressive for Good, but I would love to just hear your story. It's easier to show the successes, but the backstory and the history behind is always a very interesting process. So just tell us a little bit about you, your story, and how you got here today.
Oh my God, that's really difficult. Always rounding up decades into minutes and seconds. I'm going to try. So I originally was on the path to becoming a doctor. My dad and I had this agreement that I was going, actually, my whole family, we were aligned, including my mom, that I was going to be a doctor. And that's really what we were trying to achieve. Um, However, I've always had this right brain, left brain thing where I was really good at science, but I was really awesome at art. And I used to represent my school, my secondary school, actually, primary and secondary school, just would represent in things like science competitions, art competitions, math competitions, always loved math, literature competition, essay. And we used to win. It was really great. And then I get into uni. I'm on the path to becoming, like, I'm studying biochemistry, on the path to becoming a doctor. And I go on internship one day where I work in plant virology and eventually, I mean, no, plant medicine. Yeah, sort of like plant biochemistry and then biochemistry, which is like virology. And it was great. I mean, it was such a great experience. However, I just started to ask myself, listen, are you sure? Is this really what you want to do? There's this period where we had to deal with like taking the blood of HIV patients and just checking on them to be sure that they were surviving or like their viral load was high or not, things like that. And it occurred to me that I may not be able to deal with the loss of losing a patient, especially knowing that that would be my responsibility if I was going to go ahead with being the neurosurgeon that I wanted to be. Um, Inspired by Ben Carson, Grey's Anatomy, all those interesting people. It's so interesting. It looked really nice. On the path to becoming a neurosurgeon and all that, me dealing with the reality that if I lost a patient on the surgery table, would I be able to deal with that? Would that be something that I could handle? Also, the skill, realizing that I couldn't impact a lot of people. I'd just be limited to a few people at a time, and having to break the news to their family. Yes, it's great when you succeed, but what about the times that you don't succeed? And then the monotony of the work. To accomplish surgeon, I'm sure that there's a different, right, like there's a different feel that they get from they might find their own differences in between, but for me, it just sort of felt a bit monotonous, especially because I have a very restless spirit. So all of these realities, and I guess that's where self-awareness comes in, right? I started to explore, yes, I want to save lives. Yes, I want to be a doctor, but is there another way? Does saving lives mean only one thing? Is there another way? And that was what led me to coming back from internship, joining a public speaking club. I wasn't looking for anything when I joined. It was just an interesting club that I think the registrar founded at the time. And then we got this assignment to write business plans and proposals, which I did, which I loved. I killed it. We won. And then I was like, oh, this is great. I want to do more of this. And I started writing even more, and everyone started getting interested in my business plans, especially, right? The marketing side was always so interesting, so attractive. People were paying me money to write their business plans. And that was so interesting. That was not something I was looking out for. And it just came off the whim and it was happening. And a friend of mine said, Blessing, you should try branding and communications. This is really interesting. Probably go to a school for it because what you're doing is super close. I Googled it. I loved what branding and communications was about. It wasn't popular. And then I ran ahead, did this. It was still great. Got a job. Like I was really succeeding in branding and communications, but then I realized there's the gap. Um, a lot of agencies and top level organizations can afford to pay millions and millions of dollars on branding and communications, but the great African businesses that are doing really amazing things but can't afford this money, they don't even know how to tell their story. How do I bridge that gap? My partner and I decided to enroll in Startup Grind Lagos, where we were the director and co-director of Startup Grind Lagos. And we started to manage a community. We built it from zero to like 10,000. Well, not zero, but we got it to 10,000 people. So we had a community of 10,000 entrepreneurs, African entrepreneurs in Lagos who were attending our events, who were learning from us. We changed the structure a bit. It was such an impactful way to reach African startups. And it really rubbed me off really deeply. I got entrenched into the ecosystem. And I think it was through Startup Grind Lagos that I and Maya first met, where she wanted me to come work with her at Ingressive Capital. I'm like, then it wasn't even Ingressive Capital, it was just Ingressive Advisory. And I'm like, no, this is not really, I mean, I love what you guys are doing, but that's not my calling. At this time, I was also thinking it's difficult to replicate me and have thousands of people exactly like I can't be in everybody's business, but maybe I could train people to be a version of me or even be unique versions of me that would create help people tell their stories better. So at this time I was thinking I want to help people build skills in branding, right? And storytelling so that they could just sort of pay it forward while I was also helping entrepreneurs sort of find their way, connecting entrepreneurs with investors and ecosystem leaders, stuff like that. Well, I met Maya, we talked for a bit. Many years later, I found out that the biggest problem that people had, and this was based on a conversation with Maya as well, is like people think that their biggest problem is money. And then when you give them money, they realize, oh crap, it's talent. We don't have the talent to run this business. And that's really like I have experienced this firsthand where I was running a branding and comms company, but I didn't have enough talent to do the work. Like if I wasn't there, it was really difficult to get things moving. And so just like all of that just made it the right fit. And when we're talking about it, we structure things out. It made sense to want to help build a a company or a non-profit that would help people build tech skills, right? Specifically in software development, data design, product, and marketing. And so that was just like a good marriage of both things. And that's how Ingressive for Good started. Yeah, so that's really the story in a nutshell. Yeah, and somewhere in between that story, I also co-founded a company that eventually got acquired by Flutterwave. And funny story is, I also met the founder of that company through Startup Grind as well. So while I was doing the great work of, connecting founders and all of that, people were also noticing the quality of my work, and that kept attracting people towards me. Yeah.
Well, I love how you said somehow along the way, I also co-founded, a company, and then it got acquired by Flutterwave. It's like, oh, this happened. But
I
we
have the
all
tendency to
know
do
that's
that.
not the case. We all know there's so much work in the background. that happens. And I know I mentioned earlier about just the amazing work that Ingressive for Good is doing. And now that we know a little bit about your background, your experience, we can see, like why that has happened. And I think even, like even following you on LinkedIn, seeing your content, the way like you structure things and you present things, like it just makes, I don't know, like it makes you want to know Blessing. To some extent, you have a very attracting personality and story and the way. And I'm not a brand or communication person, but like I think it's an amazing skill that I don't think a lot of people realize the importance of it. But if you have those, you can become anything. You can do whatever you want.
Agreed. Agreed.
So let's take a step back and let's speak a little bit about your time over at Startup Grind. I see you're also very involved in like She Leads Africa and just like the whole African startup ecosystem. Um, what are some of the things that you've seen over I mean, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe even 10 at this point, working in that ecosystem?
Oh wow, the ecosystem has grown. That's the first thing. Um, I've mentored at She Leads Africa for I think 3 years, and sometimes they just invite me to come speak, right? And then we startup grind. I was doing that for almost 5 years. And there were many other things, like, we had to connect ecosystem leaders to investors. Whenever people wanted to come in for the first time, they weren't very sure and they would just ask questions and stuff like that. Just finding first, the number of thought leaders in the African startup ecosystem has grown exponentially. Also, the interest has increased exponentially as well. The valuations of companies have also really, really grown. People are more audacious to ask for what they deserve. We don't see ourselves, and even then, it's still not big enough. There's still room for more and more growth. I love that more women are coming into play. For a while, just keep seeing men and men attending your events, men. Now they're women, and I'm so excited. That is so exciting for me. I love how consciously people are putting in the effort and the work. Even women are inspiring other women to push for more, fight for more, aspire for more. That's really great. There's been a lot more collaboration as well. I'm seeing way more co-founders. I guess also that the ecosystem sort of inspired this, where lots of venture capital firms will tell you they wouldn't invest until you have a co-founder, because maybe one person is too volatile, so we need to have two. So I'm noticing that again, there's an increase in co-founded businesses as opposed to one-man businesses, and that's really, really great. Um, More international people on board, more international partnerships, more mergers and acquisitions like with Stripe and Paystack. So much is just really happening in the ecosystem. I also love how like tech has morphed from just being fintech, but you're seeing agri-tech, HR tech, and all these other techs that are birthing out of tech. It's just really beautiful for me. Those were things that didn't exist a while back, or they existed but in very tiny quantities, and then there are just people who are pushing this frontier over and over again. It's just amazing, and then people realizing that community is so important. People leveraging storytelling. I'm seeing more and more announcements on like raises, the amount that is being raised. Oh my God, so much has changed. God, I didn't even realize until I started saying
I feel like you could just keep going on and on about like some of the amazing things that is happening in the tech ecosystem as from 5 years ago. I mean, even myself, 5 years ago, I had nothing to do with the African continent, right? Like I was very laser focused on like building startups here in the US. And when I got exposed, like when I got beaten, I was like, there's no going back from here. Like we just have to keep pushing and moving forward. So I'm actually curious. I just want to know, working at a startup that eventually got acquired. First was what was that experience like, and then second, I think there's still a lot of skepticism. I don't even know if that's the right way of saying that. More
it.
investors here in the US and just like even locally about exits. And I'm going to put the stats here. But recently, my team and I did a lot of research around like the amount of exits of like merger and acquisitions that has happened on the continent just in 2021. And it's crazy, but it's actually a very high number. I think for 2021, it was something around 57 billion in M&As happened in Africa last year. And the thing is,
Hmm.
everybody only speaks about, the pay stack and like the very few, right? The war, like the war remit and like the little ones that everybody knows. But what is actually crazy is that we've seen a lot of like intercontinental M&As, right? So it's like
Hmm.
between an African bigger companies, acquiring maybe like a smaller one or like looking for market expansion and acquiring other smaller.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of that, but for some reason, a lot of the times either the amount is not disclosed or that information is not public. So people don't know that there are a lot of M&As happening. So first, tell me a little bit more about like that particular experience and give one advice to any investor out there that is uncertain about exits on the continent.
Oh, perfect. My experience, it was so mixed feelings because, this is your baby. It's sometimes difficult to admit that maybe someone else can take your baby and do something else with it. Uh, so there's that. But it was also really exciting because things that we would have had to work extra hard for the next 5 years to achieve, we found a company that had the resources to exponentially speed up that process. So the gap between reaching some of the goals, like some things that were just goals for us, became super possible because someone with more resources, more network, more access, more everything could help us get there. As long and the best part of this acquisition was they weren't going to alter the vision, they weren't going to alter the mission, they weren't going to alter the product to turn it into something that it is not. The target audience was going to remain the same. They were just going to serve them better and meet them at the point of their need. And so that made sense. So, yes, of course, we mourned losing a baby, but of course, we also celebrated the positivity for our customers. So, I guess at the end of the day, as a parent, it's your responsibility to think about your child and say, what's best for my child? How can I be present and still, give them the best that they deserve? I don't think that mergers and acquisitions should just happen for monetary reasons. I think there has to be vision alignment, there have to be mission alignment. They also have to be sure that there is value alignment, like your values are intact, and the people who are taking it away from you, or who are, I don't want to say taking it away from you, but who are inheriting it, are going to do the best and do right by your audience or by your customers, right? And that's really important. I remember there was a time WhatsApp said they were never going to advertise. And when Meta bought them, Meta had to honor that agreement for the longest time. And truly, truly, they never advertised for a very long time. And that's value alignment. So just really understanding what is value to you or what's valuable to you, rather, and ensuring that whoever is taking over respects that value. That's it, really. So my advice to investors would mostly be there's so many ways to exit. There's a limited number of IPOs that are going to definitely happen. But even then, if someone gets the chance to be acquired, that in itself is an exit, and that's a win for you because you can then be part of something bigger. So as an investor, don't look down on it. It's not failure. It's its own kind of success and it's its own kind of reach. I think that now Figma has been acquired by Photoshop and there are mixed feelings because people are not sure if Photoshop is going to honor the values of Figma, but I'm sure they must have come up with an agreement of some sort. And if they did, it's a big deal for all of the investors who had invested in Figma. But even beyond that, it's also a big deal for the team members because people who had what's it called, work shares, or what are this is called again, yeah, this percentage allocated to staff, right, the ones that they have to vest. So people who have that get to reap the benefits of their work. Investors get to reap the benefits and say, we were part of this thing that was eventually acquired by a bigger company, and that's just such a win. Also gives you access, depending on the kind of merger and acquisition, you might be able to retain shares, but now shares of a bigger company. And that's what a lot more. That's its own kind of IPO, you know. So it depends on really how you look at it and what your thesis is as an investor. But really, really just examine what exit means to you as an investor, what you define as success, what you define as success in terms of your investment, but also in terms of the market, the ecosystem, and good that is going to do for everyone. I guess that's how you make the balance, and that's how you find the value in what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, and like you mentioned, there are actually a lot more M&As happening on the continent. It's just that because of the African ways of doing things, we don't always have to be loud, right? About some of
Yeah.
the stories that are happening on the continent. All right. So let's switch gears a little bit, and now let's talk a lot more about some of the amazing work that you guys are doing at Ingressive for Good. Over the last couple of years, investors, and we've mentioned this, investors, founders, and executives in the tech startups in Africa have complained about one big thing, right?
Mhm.
The shortage of quality
Talent.
technical talent.
Yeah.
And I've seen this firsthand. I mean, as I've been writing checks and investing in different companies, one of the biggest asks for a lot of founders is always, hey, we're looking for a senior level this or like an executive for that. And even though a lot of work is being done on that end, I would love to just, like hear from you. Do you think we've overcome that challenge? Do we, have we made it?
Oh no, we haven't overcome it yet, but we've made great headway. Great headway, and I know this that we've made great headway because Global Talent Visa, Nigerians are one of the top 10 people moving to the UK or the US as tech talents. There's a reason why that's happening. It's not by magic, it's because they were trained initially to be able to, rise up to that expectation. I do find that the challenge is not a lot. As you said, people are mostly looking for senior level talent, executives, and all that. Not a lot of people are honoring entry level talents, and it's entry level talents that eventually become senior level talents. So if you don't give entry level talents the opportunity to learn, to understudy under your senior level talents or the even current talents that you have, you're always going to run into these problems. And I find that the work that we're doing at Ingressive for Good, yes, we're already seeing great impacts, great benefits, but I think it would even be more visible 4 years, 5 years from now. Already, we're seeing people who are transitioning from different career opportunities into tech. And when they talk about it, I read, I think Ventures Africa just started a series where they keep talking about, how I broke into tech. And sometimes, out of every 5 stories I read, one would reference Ingressive for Good. And I'm like, okay, we did that. That's interesting, right? And it's so touching. People do need the opportunities. The biggest problem is access. Technical training is expensive. It is very expensive, especially quality ones. So what we're really doing is that we're finding this quality talent and quality trainings and giving it to people on the platter of gold. And we're not stopping there. We're also figuring out soft skills training. We're figuring out all these other different parts and facets that other people were not thinking about. We're finding them mentors. Those I'm giving them peer-to-peer mentors as well, building community. And I think that community is even the most powerful part of it because now they can ask each other for help. Now they can come together and build something. We had a community member who they kind of found each other in school and went on, became community members, ambassadors, rather, school ambassadors and Ingressive for Good, and just gradually build and build and build. Now they're solving a social problem. They've raised, like, their company is valued at over $30 million. They are accepted at Y Combinator, just out there inspiring, recruiting more people that they worked with in the community. And now they've come back, they've given back, they've donated back to Ingressive for Good, they're hiring from Ingressive for Good. The circle is just, it keeps going, right? More people are seeing them, new businesses are sprouting out. We're connecting them back to these people, let them mentor you. You guys will figure it out together. Maybe there might be spaces for, collaboration, partnership. It's just growing on its own. And I think that that's the power in it. The fact that we know there's a problem. A lot of people are trying to find solutions. We're all working together. We're not working in silos. We're collaborating. We're figuring it out. And 5, 10 years from now, the difference would be clear. We're better than where we were, but we would even get more, you know, even get better.
Yeah. Definitely. And I love how you keep mentioning how, you're just 2 years in or 2.5 years now, and like, you can't wait to see what it will look like in 5 to 10 years. And I think that's how you measure success, right? Like
Hmm.
I think we get so caught up on, like the little things that, oh, like, what happened next month or in 6 months, in 1 year. But I measure success personally in decades, right? I'm like, okay, when I'm
Yeah,
10 years old, now it's okay, right? I challenge
exactly.
now. I'm
That's the
not
way to think about it.
in 5 and 10 years. So I love that. I think for the average African out there, and I don't know specifically, is Ingressive Capital, Ingressive for good just for Nigeria, is it just for, like for Anglophone speaking? For the average African out there that might be listening to this podcast and maybe wants to break into tech, how does it work? Like, walk us through what is the process, what it involves, and how did I get started?
Oh my God, it's so easy. First, you can just go to ingressive.org and read the resources to start. Because one of the things we try to do is not just say you have to take a training or you have to do this. We prepare your mind, we create ebooks, resources, everything for you to be able to figure it out. We do have communities on Telegram, Twitter, and yeah, on actually LinkedIn and Facebook as well. We have communities on all of these spots, but we host events with thought leaders, people from Google, people from Twitter, people from normal organizations as well. We're always hosting events because we want you to see people who started with nothing and became something with their lives. It's not for Nigerians alone, no. We're present in over, which is really weird and shocking to say this, but we're present in over 100 plus countries. Noticing that there are only 54 African countries, we decided to expand to countries where Africans are present in because sometimes students go on scholarship, but it doesn't necessarily mean like they go on scholarship to all these universities to go and study, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have all the resources in the world to figure their lives out. So we try to make opportunities available to them as well. So as long as you're an African, you would have access to Ingressive for Good. Most of our resources are curated in English because that's what we've sort of gotten the most requests for. But we're thinking gradually to expand into French as well, and gradually maybe other African um, top languages just to be able to include more people. So if you really want to be part of Ingressive for Good, it's very accessible. Just send a message, send an email, hello@ingressive.org. Tell us what it is you want to learn. We'll point you in the right direction. Or just subscribe to our emails or DM us on Twitter. Very, very accessible. And once you ask, someone will point you in the right direction. And even if there is nothing available, most times we're always publishing scholarships. We have scholarships that are recurring. We have like data scholarships with Data Camp. We have scholarships with design trainers. We have all these different tiny scholarships that we do, and we always announce them. So if you just follow us on social media, Seth, you would know, and you know what's going on. We just completed or we just finished an application round for women, about 1,000 women who wanted to study devs. So the smallest groups that we even train are like 1,000 people. That's the smallest. But what's even more painful is the number of people that we have to reject. That's I think that's the heartbreaking part because it's like you have only opportunities for say 5,000 or 1,000 and 20,000 people apply. It means you have to say no to 19,000 plus people or 18,000 people, and that's hard.
Let me hear that again. So the way it works is you have like a scholarship opportunity, maybe like a specific program. Let's say you want to learn
Hmm.
data science, right? You get a
Yeah.
scholarship from Data Camp for like 5,000 seats, right? You put it
Hmm.
out there, and then you have 20 people, 20,000 people apply. Who has the time to vet those 20,000 people to determine who is going to be the one to like?
So we have a selection no, no, it's a big deal. And that's the right question to ask, to be honest. But we have a semi-automated system because of the scale that we're operating, we have to figure it out, right? And we have a selection committee. So we already have prerequisites and key things that we're looking out for. Some things automatically filter you out. And so if you're listening to this, you have an upper hand. Number one, ensure that your email is correct. Because if your email is not correct, we can't reach you. Ensure that you're answering the questions well. So, like if someone asks you, why do you want to study data? Don't just say because I want to study data or because I want to break into tech. Give a compelling reason because 20,000 other people are applying and they're going to prioritize the people who tell us how it's going to impact their lives over people who just say just because or I feel like, So quality applications are very important. There are already prerequisites, things that would screen people out, say country, age, all of those things, And if you're earning enough to be able to um afford those trainings, chances are we're not going to consider you. So if you're earning enough, just go and pay. Don't apply to Ingressive for good. But if you're not earning enough to afford it, we would definitely, make room for you. And so when we go through all of that process and we shortlist a group of people, we still have a whole team that has to call those people to verify, are these real people? Are they, is the number correct? Did they say the truth? All of those things. We have to always do our due diligence. It's so important. And then, they sign an acceptance that all of the information that they have provided is correct and stuff like that. However, let me tell you one funny story. When we first started, right, our first thought was, oh, access to education is the difficult part. People need the training, blah, blah, blah. Guess what? That's not all. After people get the access to the training, we realize that there's so much more problems. Like they probably don't have a laptop to use to learn. And then when we provide the laptop, there's probably power issues or internet issues or like compounding issues. Like the whole continent is fighting against your learning. It's so it's so interesting. And one of the things we try to do is we make allocation for at least if certain percentage to be able to apply for our laptop relief programs. And we provide laptops for them. We do provide data when we can. It's difficult, but we try. We try to explore partnerships with some co-working spaces to be able to create an environment where people can just feel comfortable going and learning. It's hard, but we're doing it. We're doing it because it's hard. So we're not going to stop. So anybody who is listening, if you want to donate and make our work a little bit easier, we're open. Please contact us. We're happy to take your money and make people's lives better with it.
Definitely. And I think I am so passionate about nonprofits that are doing amazing things on the continent. And I am not saying that leniently. I remember in my early days, again, like born and raised in Cameroon, moving to the US. And when I came here and I saw some of the ads, right, about nonprofits on the continent, it was always, like feeding the poor, building,
Mm.
and a lot of these things. And for some reason, I don't know why it always angered me. I was like, why is it that it always has to be this portray of the continent? Why can't it be all the amazing things? Like, hey, like we're building to train as many tech talents as possible. And guess what? They're doing great, right? They are being hired
Yeah.
top performing companies across the world, that doing all these amazing things. Like show that, like show impactful things. And there's no nonprofit out there like it's bad. Everybody has a mission and they have a reason why they're doing this. But I just get so excited about things that are very concrete, that are providing jobs, building our economy, right? Helping people have really good, better standard of living. Like that to me is super impactful.
I completely agree with you. I can relate with the angered version of, particular ads. I do understand. One of the things that, I sort of built the initial brand strategy for Ingressive for Good. And one of the things that we really wrote there was we're never going to do poverty porn. We're not going to milk anybody's poverty situation to make us get money. We'd rather be broke. Instead, what we're going to do is show transformation stories. We're not going to take anybody's story out of context. We're just going to show transformation stories. And by transformation stories, we're going to say, this person used to be here, but now they're here. There's a lady that used to sell soap. That's how she survived. 20,000 naira a month was all she was making. And she pushed through. She did a 6 month training. She didn't have a laptop we provided for her. She used to go to cyber cafes and do really extreme things to try to get access to internet to do her studies. And that was really difficult for her. We provided a laptop for her. And next thing we know, she earned 10 times what it was that she was earning per month. She got a job as a software developer. Now she's moving. I'm hearing her talk about Web3. It's interesting. She's growing really fast. I can't wait to do another interview of her. That's the kind of story we will tell. And this is a real story, by the way. But that's the kind of story we will tell. We will tell you the stories of people who went from this point to that point. There was a girl we recently interviewed for our documentary, and she told us the story of how she had to farm to make ends meet, and she really described the experience, and it was painful. Like there were moments where she was talking to us and she was crying. Her mom even cried. It was so touching. And then when they were done, she just told us how now she's sitting at home. She won a laptop as well, so she's sitting at home. She would just design, work from home, and she will earn money. And it's so shocking for her. She can't believe it's happening. That's a transformation story. And those are the kind of stories that we're going to tell. We're not going to tell stories of people still stuck where they are. No, we're going to tell the transformation, the growth. And that's what we will continue to do.
Oh my God, I love it. I'm choking because I'm so excited.
Oh my God.
Like, Blessing, you shared, I would love to have you again on the podcast. I don't know when, but like you shared so amazing. I'm like filled with so much emotions. I'm super happy. I'm a big fan of what you guys said regarding Blessing for Good.
Thank you so much.
If you had one last word, this whole podcast is about living the African dream. And that might be for you personally, that might be what you want to see for the continent. What would that dream be?
Um, I know that the hustle culture is what fuels us in many ways, but I dream of a day where we will not be fueled by hustle. Like I wish that we would be. I mean, yes, hustle is nice, but I want us to know that there are many ways for us to succeed. We don't have it doesn't have to be hard to be good. It doesn't have to be hard to get to the next level. And that's what I dream for our country. Hardship should not become the norm or become the starting point. I know it's not easy, but I do know that there's the world out there where Africans are going to dominate one day. And that's really what I dream of. I also always say to the women specifically, it's okay to be the first woman in the room, but what's not okay is to be the only woman. So if you find yourself in a space where you're the only woman, bring more women in. Try to empower them to get them to the next level. Lastly, it's not enough to dream. Don't just be a dreamer. A dreamer versus a doer would go further. So dreaming is not enough. Try to do as well. So as we curate and promote the African dream, also be an African doer, the person who is doing something, no matter how little, every single day to make the continent a little bit better.
Amen to that. Blessing, it was such a pleasure having you on the podcast today.
Thank you
I
so much.
enjoyed every single second of this podcast, and I hope the audience listening or watching today's felt the same way. This was Live the African Dream podcast, and I will be seeing you guys next time.